Hello, and welcome back to my moon cycle vlog. So, our check-in for the last full moon in Aquarius back in July. So I'm sorry it took me a little minute to record this and get back to everyone. And as usual, I would love to hear about your experiences or see if any of what I experienced is relatable, or if any of you guys relate to it. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to read about it in the comments. Or if anyone has any information to share or any experiences that were really important to them, I'd love to also read about that in the comments. Because again, this check-in for me is really about obviously sharing my part of the journey for my spiritual awakening process and my ascension process, but it's really more about checking in with you all, my viewers, my subscribers. For all, I am very, very grateful, but really just trying to see if I'm alone, right? And if I'm experiencing any of these full moon cycles in similar ways to other star-seeded, ascending, fully awakened, divine light beings such as myself. So please feel free to tap in. If you enjoy any of my videos or these check-ins, feel free to like, share, subscribe. Please subscribe to my channel, Raising Vibes with Devyn. But yeah, so back to this full moon in Aquarius. So can we first start off with, it was a doozy. And I feel like I say that a lot in these check-in videos because these moon cycles, whether it's a full moon or a new moon, are always really big energies, especially for empaths or people who are highly sensitive and people who are genuinely doing this shadow work, genuinely trying to really improve and go higher and be better, and really trying to fully awaken, fully ascend, and reach that element, that aspect of enlightenment. For those of us who are living in our purpose, really trying to fulfill these missions, boy, they can take a toll, especially the full moons, because they are about releasing, and they are an element of completion, right? So I apologize, there's something in my eye, guys. Weird. Anyway, yeah, so as we know, with the astrology, or for those of you who follow the astrology, Saturn is in retrograde right now in Aquarius until October 11th. So of course that had a big deal to do with why this full moon weighed the way it did, it impacted us the way it did, as well as Venus being direct in Virgo. I think it's until, I want to say August 16th or so. And so for those of you who don't know, but for those of us who do know, Saturn's more so I think it's like a personal planet, but more so the planet about being the master of tasks, the taskmaster, the making sure that we really self-reflect, come up with our routines, and really narrow down our day-to-day tasks, but even shorter term goals that lead to long-term goals, but making sure that we're productive, really doing the inner work and reflection on knowing what's important versus what's not, what needs to be done or taken care of to reach a certain level of completion or mastery, right? I also believe it's, from what I remember, the planet of mastery, and I want to say, I think it's self-mastery, don't quote me. But then when we look at Venus, of course, is the planet that rules like relationships and relationship oriented dynamics, whether that's relationship with self, because mind you, our relationships, whether it's relationships externally, start with relationship with self, right? Everything is an outward reflection of your inward relationship with yourself, and the work that you're doing to strengthen and empower that relationship that you have with yourself. So that being said, I want to say Venus being in Virgo during this full moon also weighed heavily, because Venus is about like the relationships that have to do with like love, and that relationships that are really reflecting the love that you have for self. But those relationships externally that are affecting you. So a lot of your closer relationships, and not just romantic, right? But it could be friendships or soulmates and soul tribe that aren't just a romantic partner too, right? It could be family and friends, parents, loved ones, even your children, because I have a child myself. So, but Venus being in Virgo is really about relationship oriented with yourself and others, but in terms of also going back to that Virgo being the analytical, also master of daily routines, task, the knowingness of what works, what doesn't work, what stays, what goes. And Virgos, as we know, and if you don't know, because I'm a Virgo sun, we are the masters of being a little cutthroat or very straight to the point, kind of straight edge, right? In terms of like, okay, no, yeah, no. And so if you combine that with Venus and these relationship aspects, right? This relationship works, this one doesn't work. This aspect or element of this relationship works versus this one doesn't work anymore. That's got to go, that's got to stay. This was a really big deal. And it was especially a big deal in terms of, again, all circling back to that inward reflection when you combine all of these different planetary energies and cosmic energies working together, including the full moon, which is the release, right? So if you think about it, they're all working in partnership in tandem, focusing inward on what stays or what goes, and then wrapping up in a full moon ribbon in terms of releasing, right? So once you figure it out, once you understand at a soul level and a heart level what stays and what goes, what is incorporated at a personal level, what stays and goes, then you release it, right? You utilize the full moon energy to do that last push and let go. And so in terms of me and my experience for this full moon in Aquarius, it was a doozy, because I always say in my videos, and I know I don't want to say it gets repetitive, but I'm sure it gets repetitive, that I'm continuously doing this work with going inward, doing self-reflection, and really trying to make sure that I stay balanced and aligned with everything externally represented and reflecting in my world, aligning with what I feel and what I want for myself, right? Not even what I'm capable of for myself, but also what I want, right? What I know I can achieve, even if I haven't necessarily gotten to that point, that dynamic in my own life or within myself, right? Because everything's about growth. And so that means even understanding my own limitations or my shortcomings or the things that I have to do more work around achieving. But again, always having that drive and that awareness or that knowingness of what I'm trying to align for myself and what I want for myself, what my intentions are for myself. So I've been going through this phase up until the full moon of wanting to align myself with knowing because I know my self-worth, and I know that I don't want to be associated with third-party relationships anymore. I don't want to be associated with any type of relationship or any type of relationship dynamic that is inclusive of outside parties or outside dynamics where either I am not the full focus or I don't get to be a focus or a priority in someone else's life the same way they are for mine, well, in mine, because I'm definitely one of those people that if you're my person or if you're in my life, or friend, family member, or whoever, I'm gonna love you, I'm gonna take care of you, you're gonna be a priority. But I really, really, really wanted to focus, and I wanted to release and let go of any relationship or any dynamic that didn't reflect that, right? I've been on that wave for a while now. And so this upcoming or leading to this full moon was more push for that, right? Really going within, really reflecting, but really looking and observing in my outside world what relationship dynamics and what dynamics in my life, not even just with romantic partners, but friends and family members, aren't aligning with that intention. And so I had this one particular friendship, this one particular relationship that just was like rubbing me the wrong way and wasn't fully in alignment with, again, with that intention. And so relationships, as we know, friendships, as we know, can be very complex, very complicated. And when they're driven in love, but then you're also like trying to walk the fine lines of honoring and respecting, you know, your friend or other people in those relationships, it becomes a point of setting your own boundaries. And so it goes right back to this full moon Aquarius representing the energy representing taking responsibility, really setting boundaries, and really facing tension, right? These simmering tensions in these relationships and these relationship dynamics. And so with all of that competing, I have this particular relationship, this particular friendship in my life where there's certain dynamics or elements that I participated in and I enabled that I wasn't necessarily proud of and that I knew wasn't in alignment with my overall goals for myself. Now, to say that part of those dynamics that I participated or enabled weren't necessarily initiated by me or even harnessed by me to a certain extent, but in trying to honor and respect that relationship, that friendship, and that dynamic as a whole, I got really confused. There's a lot of gray in terms of like how I was supposed to be dealing with it. And so I ended up in this friendship, this relationship dynamic that goes on for so long, and it's like, oh, I want to change these two aspects that I feel really accountable for and really responsible for, but they're not really my responsibility because the aspects or elements that I want to change are tied to, you know, my friend or the person I'm in that relationship with, but other people within that dynamic, within that relationship. Again, that's what's complicated about third-party dynamics, that everyone is directly and indirectly impacted through changes, but not everybody has a say. And when everybody does have a say, then you have all these competing feelings, impacts, and opinions, and then you never know what the outcome's going to be. But because I really had been doing the inward work leading up to this full moon, and it was really simmering and bubbling up with me, I really felt like this was a time period for me to like push, for me to be able to clarify, really release, or at least be accountable and responsible for any part of the relationship and any part of the relationship dynamic that that wasn't in alignment with my intentions, but really in alignment with what I felt like integrity reflected or integrity looked like. And so I wanted to take responsibility for myself. I wanted to take responsibility through setting boundaries for myself, but really with that friendship, that relationship. And so in doing that, I had to have this talk with my friend, first and foremost, to let them know what my new boundaries were, right? I had to set new boundaries. And so that was first not necessarily the easiest conversation for me to have, but it was a very necessary conversation for me to have. And it was a conversation and boundaries set out of love and respect, not just for myself, but in honoring and respecting that friend and that relationship dynamic. That being said, I was actually really nervous about having that talk leading up to the full moon, and I want to say that was a couple days before the full moon. But surprisingly, that conversation wasn't something for me to be nervous about at all because it went really well. The friend respected my boundaries, my new boundaries, and allowed me to take responsibility. But then I also asked my friend to take responsibility within the relationship dynamics and honoring my new boundaries as well. And they're willing to do that. And so that part was like good. But then there's like this later fallout in terms of what we concluded was going to be like the aftermath or like the next steps in these new boundaries that we set, this new dynamic for this friendship and this relationship. It was like, okay, there's some wrongs that need to be righted, some dynamics and responsibilities that also need to be taken by other members, other party members, but then also other party members in the relationship that weren't aware of certain dynamics and things like that. As you can tell, the whole relationship and third party dynamic was a little bit messy. And so, again, back to that simmering tension and not knowing what the fallout might look like, or if it was going to actually not be a fallout, because maybe it will all go well. And so, suffice to say, that full moon, boy, that actual day of the full moon started off, optimistically. It was like, we're going to all meet, we're going to have some talks, it's going to go good. And then we're going to have to see how things end up going. And let's just say, I feel really proud about the fact that I was accountable and took responsibility for myself. And I really tried my very best to show up as my authentic self in this conversation and in the shift. With the knowingness that I might lose out on the dynamic of this friendship, or I might lose out on this friendship altogether. What feels like a soulmate friendship altogether, right? And so I went into the conversation, I went into this meeting with that thought process and with that faith. And it didn't necessarily go the way I would have necessarily wanted or planned for or foreseen. But because I'm also in the space of being open and just receiving from the universe whatever it gives me in terms of outcomes in the way conversations go, outcomes in terms of how relationships go, because relationships, they leave, they stay, sometimes they fade away, sometimes they strengthen. You just never know. And because relationships involve other people and their free will, and a lot of times are about moving through karmic lessons, you just lack so much control. So that being the case, I had to really conquer or move through fear to even get to that conversation that day of the full moon. And so whereas I thought that the hangout and the conversation would go a certain way, let's just say it didn't go as pleasantly in terms of the outcome as I would have hoped for. And that was a great learning lesson for me. It was a recent learning lesson that everything that you do for yourself to stay in alignment or to be in alignment, and that's for your highest, greatest good, in alignment with your higher self, is it gonna always turn out rainbows and cupcakes and, cloud nines and, sunshines and Skittles? It's just not. Sometimes it crashes and it burns, or sometimes, you're going downhill and you thought you did it, whee, and then, bam, whoosh, everything just catches on fire, right? Or maybe it's like a slow burn, a slow sizzle, and a whoosh, right? Like a slow lead up to an explosion. I can describe it in a million different ways. But the point is, that's kind of how my experience was in terms of that relationship dynamic and that friendship particularly for the full moon. But I learned to still face my fears, and I still feel really good, and I still got all my synchronicities. So that let me know I did the right thing. And I felt really good in terms of showing up authentically and knowing that even though the relationship dynamic and the friendship didn't stay, right, and isn't the same as it was before, it's not because I wasn't authentic or trying to be in alignment with that intention. And so I am still in alignment, and I still felt my vibration go higher, and my vibe is still high, y'all. So I would encourage any of you to do what I did in terms of staying true to yourself, trying to improve your relationships, but really doing the work on yourself, knowing what you need and want to be in alignment with yourself and your highest, most divine potential, and allowing that to reflect in your relationships, even if that means having hard talks, setting new boundaries, and really taking responsibility for yourself, but then also encouraging other people by default to take responsibility for themselves. And you would be surprised, because all you have to do sometimes is be the initiator. You take responsibility and they take responsibility, and that can just shift so much in love and create so much healing. But then everybody gets their own opportunity to build their own world, to be able to create their own individual daily routines, tasks, their own shifts, look at their own inward healing, but then they can show up for themselves differently, thus allowing them to show up for you differently, and vice versa. So that's how my full moon in Aquarius went. Again, I had a little blowout, didn't go like I expected, and I had a really important friendship dynamic shift. But it was all for my highest, greatest good, I believe, and I know, because it was done from a place of authenticity within myself. And I truly hope and really wish and pray for the same for each and every one of you. Whether you subscribe or watch or view me or not, you come across this channel, I hope that you are living your most authentic life and self, and being brave and moving through your fear to always show up for yourself, always set those boundaries, and truly build the beautiful life this Venus energy, this Saturn energy really, really wants for you, and utilize, this moon energy to amplify, clarify, and really highlight for you maybe the things that you haven't been able to see. So with that being said, I can't wait to see you next here for the new moon video. It's going to be out in a few days, maybe later on this week, and we're going to talk about the Lion's Gateway portal, also again that new moon energy. So in the meantime, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. Drop a comment. I'll see you soon. Thanks.